back to Straight No Chaser, episode 22. We got a very special guest today, my friend Sadiq Sheik. So Sadiq is in his last semester here at Suffolk University. He is a marketing major, and he's actually the president and head coach of Suffolk University FC, our soccer team here. And besides that, he also, like I mentioned, he's got his coaching license, so he's a registered coach, and he's also been previously certified with CPR. And he has a lot of prior experience as well, working different jobs. He has a big career with, or he's had a lot of experience with real estate as well. So just to start off the interview, Sadiq, do you mind talking a little bit about what drew you towards your major and kind of what kind of potential like jobs or internships or just like careers you see with this major here at Suffolk?
Yeah, for sure. So, what led me into doing marketing in general, specific with brand marketing and product design, was, for those of you like that know me, it's I've always been a very versatile and adaptive person. Really, always excited to be a team player, work on a variety of different projects, and really my experience with real estate, starting with my dad's business here in the greater Boston area with, open houses, buying and selling properties, and just being a part of that process of what it's like to prepare a house for sale, really kind of impacted me. Working with tenants impacted me. Being a part of the soccer teams basically since I was in middle school through high school and even in college, I've always gravitated to doing work that is meaningful towards impacting other people. And so with marketing, the cool thing about it is there's so many things you can do with it, where it's like, if you have a passion for the automotive industry, if you like cars, you can easily work within, the design aspect of, vehicles being put out there. I actually did a presentation project my freshman year for ENT 101, where we had to do a mock project for Tesla and talked about their factories producing cars and batteries and stuff. So that was a lot of fun. And, the great thing about the marketing courses here at Suffolk is you work on different cases as you progress through the coursework, where it's doing work with Grubhub now, and I've done stuff with the food industry. I've done stuff with the music industry with things like Spotify. And it's just a lot of fun, I think. In general, just being able to be that person to see cases, to see projects, and really watch them go from day one to, that finish line. So I guess that's really where why I chose marketing, because I'm such a, adaptive person. And really the next step for me in my career is really honing in on impacting people in a meaningful way, and being that support system because of my experiences over the last couple of years with taking care of things at home with my father, who developed Alzheimer's when I was 17. And, right in the middle of college, one of our properties burnt down, and it was one of the worst fires here in the Boston area. It was in the summer of 2017. No, my mistake. Summer of 2018, yeah, where it basically in 24 hours, the entire building was gone, and it led to a massive case. It was covered in the news. Things are much, much better now, but, I had to handle those types of situations while I was going through school my sophomore year, and it was rough, because I was that kid where as soon as class was done, I was gone right on the train home. And in the beginning, I definitely felt, maybe disconnected from school. And from there, it took me time to sort of get comfortable with things, and then really realize that there's a lot of great people here at our school and just in Boston in general. So that really, meant a lot to me. And going back to my idea for future career goals and jobs, it's the next step really is, how can I be there for small businesses, for families, people who have dreams in terms of creating something, whether it's running a store or running a project. I have a lot of friends in the music, fashion industry, and I'm so supportive of their work. I love small businesses, and I think the next route for really is whether something in academia, potentially pushing into grad school and doing work as a researcher, or eventually one day a professor would be amazing to me. And then I think more immediately would be doing work in law. So I think really the next step is looking at grad school and getting a JD through law school, and becoming an attorney within marketing, or whether it's through potentially even immigration. I have a lot of interest just in general with being that underdog in terms of protecting those types of people. That's important to me because It kind of translates from my experience in soccer. Like I've been a defensive player my entire soccer career, I guess. And, I've always been that number five, number six guy right in the middle of the field, make those tackles, make those passes. That's all I did. That's all I knew. So now I'm sort of playing on a different field, so to speak, with, going against, you know, different cases, works, projects, and whatnot. So, I mean, that's kind of really it. Like I do definitely do a lot, and I'm more than proud of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. So it's like you really have a passion basically for like coaching and helping others.
For sure.
I was gonna say that's like a really great way to sum it up because, like, for as long as I knew you, so like we met through Suffolk FC, and you've always been the one to like take charge and take the initiative and the action when there isn't one. Like when everything was kind of in chaos when the club first was starting, you were the one to really be like, no guys, this is like what we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna do it, and you like look out for everybody. Like you kind of like you look out for everyone who's part of your team, and that's something I've always admired actually a lot. And I hope that that carries it into your career in the future as well. Um, so if you want to talk actually a little bit more about anything you experienced in particular doing your real estate work, because I know real estate in the greater Boston area is like a pretty like immense thing. Like it's pretty like there's a lot of different situations you run into. Obviously, like there's a lot of expensive homes there. There's a lot of like with the high college student population, there's a lot of demand for housing, and we have our own. Me and Abby, because we live together, we have our own whole like amount of stories of stuff that we've ran into renting in the city. So, just if you want to kind of explain some of like your some of the most significant kind of stories or experiences you've had in that field.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely speak on just seeing a lot when it comes to property management and dealing with tenants and doing real estate. So, further background on that, like the work that my dad did here in the greater Boston area through ERA Millennium, he was actually a co founder of the firm here in Everett. And he's been in that business for, more than 40 years. Obviously had to retire when he got sick. But at the peak of it, really, we were doing, a variety of buying and selling. That was like the beginning when I was a little kid before I really understood it. My dad was the person to go in to invest, to, see what buildings are like, work with people in, Everett, Malden, Revere, Somerville, Cambridge, Tewksbury, and even as far as like the border to New Hampshire and then down towards Connecticut. Like my dad covered a lot of, places in Massachusetts. So, but specifically for when I got more involved, it was basically any city right outside of Boston, and we covered a lot of like houses for, young families or people who are well established in their careers. So people looking to make that, that second move. Like they may have rented for a while, and then now they're trying to actually buy a house. So one of the biggest challenges that I have faced during that experience as a broker's assistant was people needing pre-approval letters, so needing some sort of financing or some sort of financial assistance to go ahead and put down that offer on a house. It was very, in the last couple of years, it's been very tough in this area, despite seeing, the rise in rental prices because of Encore Casino, and like the whole new like infrastructure growing in the area. So I've seen a massive shot in like rental prices in general, where, for example, a four-bedroom apartment here in like Everett Malden, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, you could get easily for like 16 to 1800, and now it's like if it's remodeled, painted, has anything that's a little updated, they're charging 3K plus for it. So it's definitely a big jump. A lot of families have moved out. It kind of really happened right as I left high school, where a lot of families couldn't afford to live here anymore. So it's like you see that influx of potential with gentrification and things like that. So that definitely does occur. But to speak on some of my stories with being working with my dad as a landlord and collecting things and whatnot, definitely have had my fair share of stories with tenants. One time we had a property where a tenant was 3 months behind on rent, and they were, very rude with us. They were tough. Like I was, believe it or not, I was one of those guys with my dad that would go collect the rent on the first. I was one of those guys knocked on the door. If you saw me, typically it meant you owe the rent. So nothing like a goon or nothing like that. But came there, we had a situation once where, going back to that same tenant who was late, where they paid us, and majority of it was cash, right? And then a good portion of, like, I want to say $300 was in change. It was ridiculous. Like, it was just such a like one of those YouTube, Facebook video moments where it's like, this is happening. Are you serious? And like, it was in like a jar, and I was like, this is all I have, sir. And I'm like, all right then. And I took it to the bank and I used Coinstar and like whatever. That was the end of that. But definitely did not expect that. And then I've had a situation where a tenant we evicted, went through a crazy process. It was in the middle of the winter, I want to say like 5 years ago. Opened all the windows up, shut off the heating system, shut off everything, and the pipes froze overnight and flooded the second and third floor in 24 hours. So it cost us $6K in repairs to do that during the winter for plumbing, electrical work, basic carpentry. It was a mess. Another one from my dad's story. He was helping a guy who had a horrible tenant, and I want to say Medford or Revere. The guy poured cement in all of the toilets in the house. There were 3 toilets, and he clogged the plumbing system. I know.
Why do that? That's insane.
What?
Oh my god.
What purpose?
Honestly, I think a lot of these people just wanted to get back at us, so to speak, or get back at, like, just being frustrated about being kicked out or like having to move because they didn't want to. You run into a lot of those situations, especially when you work with like the housing authority, throughout different cities, whether it's Boston Housing Authority, whether it's some of the smaller cities. And you tend to unfortunately get some tenants that, when you charge a lower rent price or you're struggling with managing your properties, you run into like tough tenants, so to speak, where they may be, having assisted financial help from the government or any sort of programs really that's there to cover part of the rent. And so when that happens, you deal with inspectional services, and their whole job is really to come in and point out things, whether it's fire alarms, whether it's, the electrical system, whether it's the heating system. So this is kind of like tying back into like my own personal skills growth, where it was like I had to learn about these things on the fly. I have a lot of raw experience. I would never had that cushy experience, thing where, you have like this job, you go from there. Like I was on, the boots on the ground, so to speak, with my dad and under my older brother, where, if a heating system was messed up, we'd go drain the water, we'd wait for the plumber to come. If there was an electrical issue, we'd pull the breakers out, we'd shut it off. I've seen that happen before. I've seen fire alarms go off for no reason, changed batteries. And really just like when you're a homeowner in general, like that's like the next step from, when you rent an apartment, you pay attention to little things like, let me close the window, let me check the heat, things like that, right? But when you become a property owner, you're responsible for a lot of things too, just the overall maintenance of a household, right? And when it comes to tenants, you have to be on your toes to, look after a property, because that's how you run into inspectional issues. That's how you run into fines. And then that's how you go down this legal route of like, all of a sudden, I'm just using the rent to support me owning the property, and I have no income whatsoever. And if there's any massive issue, I can't handle it. So then you run into not paying the mortgage. And then when that happens, you run into foreclosures. And when foreclosures occur, which are happening a lot now in the greater Boston area, even to this day right now, is you run into investors. You run into sharks, so to speak, in some occasions. Not always. Some of them are very helpful. Some do not care at all, right? Where they will come in, they will gut the house. It happened to my family personally, where, we struggled with one place, and the house was worth $6. House had to be listed to be around $200K, and to beat a foreclosure date, to beat the auction and whatnot. And people bought it for $2, and 3 months later, they updated some things. They flipped for $750. So they made a massive profit, within a 3-month span of purchasing a, pre-foreclosure property, just based off of the fact that there was an auction pressure on it. So you run into a lot of those games when you get into the real estate industry. You really need to have some sort of financial backing. That's the sad thing about it, where you don't really see that too many mom and pop, sort of like, hey, like we own the apartment upstairs, we'll rent it out to college kids, or we'll rent it out to a family. And now you see a lot of management companies coming in, formal treatment, formal care, things like that. So whether or not it's a good or bad thing, I'm not sure. I think it's just rough when you deal with that. Like I run into situations with um, just unruly tenants in general. Like on a more personal note, like I've been threatened before, multiple times, as you guys know, with collecting rent, where people are just ridiculous. Like I came up to a guy, told me to, go back to my country, stupid Muslim, things like that. So I'm sure, for you guys in here, you can understand that. So, no big deal. And probably another crazy thing was, having a tenant put cameras all over the windows and record us, coming around the property and stuff. He had one of those ring doorbells that could watch you 24 hours a day. So if I'm on the porch, he knows I'm there.
Bro, you could be using that money to pay rent. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Right, and we had this guy. There's another story for you, where his rent was $1,300 for a 5-bedroom apartment. It was him, his wife, and 2 kids, and like we needed to raise the rent. This was about 3 years ago, and it was like rent's got to go up. We got to do at least 18. Like that's the market value in the greater Boston area right now for a nice little small, like kind of modern apartment, not like super updated. And we told him that basically verbally, right? And this was at the beginning of the year, back then, right? And what he did was he proceeded to go to inspectional services and file a claim saying that we were retaliating against him for raising rent, and basically launched this game where if we accepted the rent from him, that was us showing, I guess, legally that we're accepting that there are issues with the property. So we ended up not cashing in on those checks and holding on it and entering this crazy legal game where, his lawyer was pushing it from courthouse to courthouse, month to month to month. So this guy he left the property with saving almost 20K on rent, and it was just a mess because that house had to, that 1,300 was the minimum to cover a mortgage, for example, right? And so it just became a whole legal mess. And so that's one of the rough things about working with tenants, especially in lower income neighborhoods, is that you run into those issues of people not fully understanding the system, or potentially even cheating you as a small time owner, or even as a mid-tier level person. So you have to be prepared for that too. Craziest situation too was my brother was actually threatened, physically, before. This guy had a gun. He didn't pull it out, but he do it. So
God.
a lot of stories of just calling, saying, "Hey, this tenant's acting up. I need some help here. Come now." And I just remember leaving school at Suffolk and just running through the train station, forget the past. I'm on the train. The amount of times I've run up and down Tremont Street to get home, in my freshman year, crazy. Things are a lot better. We're not managing that many properties anymore. We're sort of away from that business now, which is a nice thing. But yeah, I believe me, guys. I've seen a lot. Believe me, there's nothing that could surprise me now when it comes to tenants being unruly. I'm more than happy to work with college students or just people who are going to sign a lease. And so that's the other thing too, quickly for you guys to hear, is that, there are lease agreements and there are set deals with tenants and landlords. And then there's a tenancy at will, right? And so tenancy as well, it's you're just sort of verbally saying that, if a lease expired, those things are there, but it's, you stay there as long as until we, file an eviction notice or file some sort of, civil or some sort of legal suit against you to move forward with taking the property out, right? And so those things get messy, especially now there's a moratorium, right? And so landlords can only evict on very, very special circumstances, right? And I haven't run into this yet, but ideally the next date, I believe, is end of March of this year to have evictions renew again, unless they extend it, which probably they will. Same thing when it comes to mortgage payments. So that's something going on now. And just in general, it takes the first notice you file, right, is a notice to vacate. And that's, you give someone 30 days, hey, you have this much time to leave. And if you don't, then that's when the eviction process starts. So typically people have from anywhere from 30 to 90 days to leave. And if they don't leave at the very end of it, which I've seen many times, is you run into the situation where a sheriff will come in and they'll bring a move-in company service, and then they will go in, they will take the things out. If the tenant lost the case, for example, and then they will take the things out, they will change the locks, and then they will work with the tenant to find temporary housing. But that's at the very end of it. That's like months and months down if it gets very ugly in that situation. So believe it or not, I have seen that multiple times too, which was not fun. Believe me, when you have to sit there and watch someone take their stuff out as they passively aggressively walk past you, not fun. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my experiences with just real estate in general on the landlord tenant side. In terms of like the open houses and stuff, that was a lot of fun. I think that's where I learned how to, work with tenants and work with buyers and sellers in general, and just really get to understand like you meet all kinds of people through open houses. Like you find like the business people in the area, you find young families, you find college students that have managed to invest and save money really well. So it's a great business to be in because it's old school networking. Like if you guys feel where it's like, oh, go see Jimmy down at the auto body shop, like he'll take care of your car, or go see I have a lot of like old school connects like that here, where I grew up in like Everett Malden and stuff, where you go to the same auto body shop, you go to the same restaurants, you go to the same dentist or doctor. So believe it or not, like those things still happen, like where you see like old school type of connections through my dad's work. He was in Qantas. He was also a member of the Chamber of Commerce, so like the Real Estate Guild, things like that. So you meet a lot of people through that. So I was like, that little kid next to my dad going to those meetings growing up. And my dad really built this business up from scratch. He came over here at a young age, with my mom to start a new life at, late 20s, early 30s. And being from South Asian, Middle Eastern culture, it was tough, because you come into a city environment where it's Italian American, Irish American, South American now, and like a variety of different cultures being in the area now, which is amazing. But in the beginning, back in like the early 80s and stuff, there was not much diversity, and there were a lot of challenges, especially post 9/11 and whatnot, with discrimination, racism, and just overall prejudice, right? And so that's something that I've come across before, occasionally with a lot of the older people, part of the industry in real estate, where they may not be comfortable to talk to you because of who you are. And so the way you beat that or handle that is just show the work you can do, and really bank off the network you have through everywhere else with young professionals and people that are willing to support you no matter what. So yeah, I mean, that's really kind of my experiences with real estate. You really learn a lot, whether it's like I've actually also like done hands-on work myself. I have a lot of informal experience with doing carpentry. Like I've painted houses, like like rooms. I've done flooring. I've done basic like hardware stuff, and removing appliances and trash. And trash removal. Yeah, this last thing really quickly too with real estate stuff is like tenants, man. When you kick them out and they leave things behind, it's disgusting. Like I found like a sofa filled with just garbage, like just straight garbage. Like I don't know, like I feel like this one tenant just sat there unemployed and did nothing while we were dealing with this case. And so not everyone was like that. It was just a very horrible man to deal with, so that was a couple years ago. But yeah, like I remember carrying this couch out thinking like, what is like a some sort of like a health hazard or whatever. So toss it out there, pay the $15, trash man comes Friday, picks it up. So I did a lot of that in high school too, and unfortunately, in the beginning of college too. But hey, it's honest work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, dude. I mean, it seems like you really dealt with like the grimy people, like the grimy side of like Boston and the Boston suburbs. Like you got some pretty like, it just sounds like some pretty like kind of depraved people out there. I don't know.
I feel like the best lesson from that is there's so many like different types of people that you deal with in the industry. And I actually had like a follow-up question. So I remember you said that like there's an issue with gentrification in the sense that like a lot of people that are like smaller mom and pop, or even like people who are looking to buy in the area, the prices are almost higher than they can afford. So a lot of people are leaving the city. What do you think's causing that?
So what I quickly mentioned earlier at the talk was, the impact of the casino. So Encore Casino right here in Boston, or really Everett actually, that had a massive impact because it sort of changed the environment around the cities outside of Boston, where it was like now it's becoming more lucrative to live here. People want to work in Boston. Like if you're familiar with the current work going on in Seaport, for example, with like Amazon, building more buildings there, and more jobs are coming in here for technical work. People with bachelor's degrees are now having to push more into like graduate programs just to stay competitive in their careers, for whether it's work with data analytics, or whether it's just entrepreneurship or investors, business people. That's really like growing in Boston. So I mean, it's exciting in that Boston's becoming more and more of like a tech hub, if you will, where like things are coming here, startups are occurring, like for example, like LearnLux, and like HubSpot's been a mainstay here in Cambridge. So these are all definitely factors that play into the rise in rental income and property value. It's more of an investor's game right now, where it's like you buy low and you sell high. We're finding, like from my own experience in the last few years, I've seen a lot of like people come from like way outside of Massachusetts, whether it's like Acton, or even like a couple people from like Connecticut I've come across, or even New Hampshire, saying that, hey, I want to be able to drive into Boston more easily, going from an hour to 2 hour drive to, let's say, 15, 30 minutes, either heading towards Assembly Row in Somerville, or taking, the Rotary and passing the casino and Honda cars to Boston, and then getting right there in Government Center. So these areas are becoming very lucrative. And so that's the challenge with gentrification, is that, believe it or not, a statistic that I've seen before is that Everett is one of the most diverse cities here in Massachusetts, if not the most diverse city, based on stats from the census, I believe. And it's sad to see, like, people having to leave and go to cities like, to buy, if you're struggling or you need to settle somewhere, the hottest cities that I can tell from now, just from reviewing, like databases and reviewing things like Zillow, for example, is like not Somerville, Saugus, Woburn, Worcester, and just farther out west, like, potentially even Springfield, right? Because those places are becoming more of like, okay, small town vibes, family can grow there, things like that, not needing to go into the city. So anything outside of Boston that's really close has become extremely, like, costly in some ways, if it's modernized and if it's, rebuilt, things like that. And so when I say, the term gentrification, it's occurring because, the majority of these homeowners that are, of a diverse background are struggling to afford their properties, are struggling to afford rent, because a lot of them, this ties into like the education route, like how many kids from these areas are actually able to complete a bachelor's and actually able to afford school. It's very tough, like you guys, all of us in here know how difficult it is to cover tuition and deal with situations where you can't make a payment on for tuition on time, and you get into the situation where it's like, man, like I can pay tuition this month, but I won't have the books at least for another month. Like, how will I handle school? So, unfortunately, like I've gone through that before myself, like when I started college, where it's like, like you're in the library and like just begging them to like, hey, can I keep the book for at least the whole day or something like that. So my answer to the question is, like, it's occurring because, people are just not able to afford it. One, because of the impact of the casino, and then two, just the type of people that are entering the environment. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that things are changing. It's like a couple of years ago, people were, leaving, like, again, right? They're going to more rural areas, and then there was a pattern. So I'm sure something like that will occur again once the market settles. Right now it's hot because with COVID, people are working at home. They want bigger properties. They want a garage. They want a place where they can barbecue and sit outside. So, I mean, that's like a big thing with buying houses and apartments too.
But one thing that is kind of a shame with gentrification is that you see areas like Southie and like Dorchester and places like Roxbury that like have like these traditional like Irish or Italian, or like where my family is Polish, like in Dorchester, like working class communities, or over in Roxbury they have like Haitian and Jamaican and Dominican communities. They're like these working class kind of people who've been there a long time. They own all the businesses there and they own all the shops. But you see a lot of those people are kind of getting pushed out because they can't afford the rent because of all the college students and young professionals who are moving in there.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I find a little bit kind of sad about the gentrification in the city.
By the way, I have another question as well. Like, how do you set up your schedule? I think one of the interesting perspectives from like your standpoint is like you have a platform to educate students who are attending Suffolk, and you obviously have a lot of experience in not only real estate but like helping others as well. So like, what's your advice to a college student that's trying to like plan their time or use time management to their advantage?
My number one piece of advice would be, in general, is have flexibility in your schedule. Be able to prioritize. Something that's always been important to me since I started, college or even in high school, really, was learning how to prioritize. Meaning, like, what tasks can you get done immediately? What needs more time? And where should you address things? And you really have to play things by ear. I've learned how to, like, call audibles, really, where I'm changing, my decisions last second, really, because that's just the nature of my life, where um, I think the next piece of advice really is just, there is no one set path in college and our academic careers in general. Like, sure, there's the 4 year thing and like 5 classes, 15 credits, get an internship, meet friends, things like that. Like, you don't need to get stuck on that. I think some people can do way more than that. By all means, if you want to finish in 3 years, go for it. If you have the funds, the backing, and you're in good mental health standing, do it. But if you're not and you don't check off one of those boxes, prioritize. So, for example, my freshman year, I prioritized taking care of things at home. So I took the minimum credits to be considered full time, which was 12. And I did not come to campus on, I believe, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I was only on campus Mondays and Wednesdays. And I actually wrapped up the day from basically 9 o'clock to like 5 o'clock. So kind of like a job. I treated school like a job my first year, really, because I had so much going on where, I was responsible for looking after, like my younger sibling, taking care of my parents, and taking care of the business. And so my education was important. The main goal was like, get good grades. Like, the higher you can score on things, do it. If you know there's an assignment that you can't handle, take the hit. I think that's another thing that I mentioned too, is like, learn how to be okay with things like that, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be perfect. You're going to bomb the test. You are going to fail many times. You will miss things, but it's important to know that that's okay. And in terms of scheduling, like, for me, it's like, my courses are like, in the middle of each day, and afterwards it's like, I will work either very early in the morning with my tutoring job at Suffolk, or I will do it later in the day and help like international students or anyone in need of, care.
I was gonna say the last thing I do want to touch on in the interview, of course, is something I want to hear about, is how you kind of chose the path to become a certified coach and kind of your experience taking up the coaching and president role at SUFC, and a little bit about how soccer has been a huge part of your life.
For sure. So, I guess where soccer really starts for me is just growing up and watching my older brother, playing within the Massachusetts Youth Soccer League, so MYSL,
Yeah,
and the Bay State Soccer League. Yeah, so youth
Bays,
soccer.
yeah.
Yeah, so my brother was a standout when he was in middle school. He was offered to play for the state. He played districts. He was a right wing and right back. He was a part of a team that went back to back, really, with winning state titles. So like, when I was a little kid, in the city of Everett, my older brother, and so watching that inspired me a lot, just because that's where I first saw the game. And then as I got older, I started to hear more about my dad's, previous experience in life. My dad was actually a very top athlete in Pakistan in his career, academically through college. He was the goalkeeper. Believe it or not, he was on the national team as well. He had trials with several professional teams in Europe. So my dad had the opportunity to go up to Europe a few times at the same age I'm at now, at 22. And at 18 and 17, where, he's looking at clubs, whether it was in England, London, whether it was in Turkey, whether it was in Spain. So my dad was a strong goalkeeper. He was, he was a track star too. He did the 100, he did long distance and stuff. So he basically ran a lot. And so that inspired me a lot to get into athletics as I got older, into your teenage years. So I really entered when I was at the end of middle school. And in high school, that's when I started playing for my team, for both. Basically, I played for all teams. It was freshman, JV, varsity, town, districts, club. Like, I got a lot of experience from that, and so I love that because I just love the challenge of competing. The sport, I loved studying the sport. I just fell in love with the game, and I think the biggest thing, like that we mentioned before we started this call, was what made me really fall in love with the game was like two different moments. The first one was watching Ronaldinho play. So Ronaldinho is a Brazilian legend for Barcelona, for AC Milan, and he was on the cover of FIFA 2007, and so I had a PSP. And so there was a game in there where you could practice, I guess, juggling and playing this concept where you have to hit the wall to get points. And so I had a wall in my backyard that looked exactly like that. So when I was little, like I drew all the points on the wall and I would practice hitting them and just juggling and just touching the ball. Like, and I did that every day after school to get used to it. And that made me was like, wow, like this is like, I just love doing this. It's fun. And like the second moment for me was when I really started watching the sport, like pro games. Was watching Chelsea and that star team in 2011, 2012 with Didier Drogba, Petr Cech, John Obi Mikel, Ramirez, all of the Chelsea legends, really, under
It's all of
Roberto
them
Di
right there.
Matteo. Yeah, there's many more, David Villa and whatnot.
There's like one more, right?
Fernando Torres.
Shevchenko.
Yeah, and so
I like too.
Roberto Di Matteo and Andre Villas-Boas, the two coaches, young guys, took over Chelsea midway from Roman Abramovich, and they made this crazy run in the Champions League. And like, I'll never forget the Barcelona game where Fernando Torres broke through and tapped the ball in. That same day, I looked at my dad and I was like, I want a Torres jersey. He wasn't the best for Chelsea overall, but he had his moments. I know he was a Liverpool guy, but the game that impacted my life really was the final. Chelsea versus Bayern Munich at Bayern Munich's home, 2011-2012 Champions League final. I remember waiting for my dad to come home from work, and we watched the game late at night. It was like 11, 12, and at the time I was like in 7th grade, 8th grade, so it was late for me. And I just remember seeing like how crazy it was to get Drogba, like, and see him hit that header and go wild, and like fans, and just hearing about Bayern Munich and how like Arjen Robben, Frank Ribéry, Thomas Muller, and like that whole squad of like the Bayern, like that was like that treble winning team later on, right? And so I'll never forget watching double overtime and seeing like the penalties and just like celebrating with my dad. Like throughout that whole game, my dad was teaching me things. He was pointing out like, oh, pay attention to Czech's stance, or oh, watch how Luis tracks back. And like that's when I learned how to go from passively watching soccer just like for fun to learning how to switch to actually study the game and to be like, this is like what you're supposed to do as a soccer player. And so that's how I got into it really. And like, I went through high school, and the next step for an impact for me was really my high school coach, Edgar Ruiz. Amazing guy. He impacted my life, forever. I'm still in touch with him to this day. He talks to me, whenever I can. And he was the reason why he was such a great coach is because he just didn't care not just about like what happened on the field, like how we playing and stuff like that. He cared about us as individuals. He wanted us to grow in school. He wanted us to have vision, because he grew up in Everett when things were very rough here, whether it was like, gang related issues, violence, crimes, and just seeing like kids go down a wrong path, which happens a lot in the sport, right? So he really was there for me when my family was going through things, and he motivated me to work every day. And like, he was the type of guy where he got the keys to the fitness center, the gym, the weights, the track, and he would leave it open, and he would have us work out during the winter every day. So that was my routine when I was a junior in high school, to get out of class, go see him, help him work with his students. So that's how I got into tutoring too, kind of like to add to the story, where I would work with his freshmen and sophomores. We'd finish helping the kids with extra help, and then we would go work out for 2 hours, and then I would go home and I would pass out, and then I would wake up the next day, so that was my routine for a long time. I love that. I still do that now with lifting and stuff, but basically he impacted me because he was a presence. When he walked into the room, everyone was quiet. I don't know if you guys experienced this too, just playing sports in general, or even with teachers.
Definitely.
They walk into like the room, like sometimes he would come to pickup games when we would just play randomly, and everyone would go from just like messing around to like, I'm gonna try hard because I want to make the team. And so it would make things interesting. Like guys would go harder, tempo would pick up, and like I literally used to play pickup soccer every day at 4 o'clock in high school. Like I had a squad of like 30 guys who would go every day consistently. It was like our job. It was so much fun. We had like this bond. We were this nitty gritty team from Everett. When we would play in town, we would go far away to like richer cities, things like that. We played St. John's Prep, a couple of other prep schools, and like we would walk in and we would deal with things like racism and discrimination. We would have those situations where people would say slurs to us, or I'll never forget, like, oh, Everett's here, hide your pocketbooks and bags, and we would be like, what does that mean? And then 30 minutes in the game, we put up 8 goals, and we look at them and it's like, who's talking now? So I will
St.
always
John's
cherish
Prep are
that.
assholes. I've played up there before. Fuck those
Yeah.
guys.
So fun fact with them, if you're making 2 substitutes, they'll make like 6 or 7. Like they'll take the whole team out. They don't call
Yeah.
each other by names. They're like midfielders come up. So I always thought that was weird, but um, yeah. So I mean, I got into coaching because after I had a lot of issues, entering college with just like handling so much, like because again, like the theme for me is just being involved with so many different things. So it was tough to get involved with the men's varsity team here at Suffolk. I had a lot of great conversations with the head coach back then, who was here in the first, I want to say, 2 or 3 years of my collegiate career, and like,
Was it the one? Is it who I'm thinking of? The guy who got fired after their terrible season?
Yeah, I believe so. So I went to a few trials. I got a chance to see like the team. I met a lot of guys through the tryouts, and it was tough. Because the thing is, like, as you guys know,
Yeah.
with playing sports, like you have to be so 100% committed to taking care of your body. You have to eat right. You have to go to sleep. You need at least 8 to 10 hours of sleep if you're an athlete. Like you have to have a clean diet. You have to watch drinking. You literally can't smoke or do anything like that, really. And you have to put yourself in this mindset that when you're there to play, you're there to work. And so it was tough for me because my body was depleted. Like and depleted in a sense where I was skipping meals a lot. I wasn't eating right times, and like because I was all over the place. I'm going to class here, then I'm all of a sudden I have an issue with a tenant in a different city, so I'm like running around everywhere, and like it took me a while to like I had a lot of car trouble, things like that, and like it was just very difficult. So to get to the point where SUFC was founded and stuff like that, it was really just off a whim where I went to see student service. I believe it was like student leadership's office in Sawyer, and I just had a conversation with them. I was like, "Hey, how like are there club teams here? Like, how does that work?" I felt like that schedule would fit my life a lot better, right? Just because at the varsity level, like I remember the coach telling me that like, "Hey, we have practice in the middle of the day. Like, you need to be in East Boston at like 11." I'm like, "How am I supposed to get there? Like, I can't pay that much for the train. Like, if I hop it, will you bail me out? Like, I don't know." Um, so basically, like I went to a couple of counselors there, and I asked them like, how do you start that? And so they said you need other members, you need people to like help you create a club. And so at the time, I barely knew anyone because I was always leaving school, and the people that I did know did not play soccer, so it was tough. So I created like this whole plan where I was like, why don't we create like a men's program or a women's team to enter like the Bay State Soccer League or enter BSSC, which is like club pickup soccer, co-ed soccer, and all of that really was covered through like all these different processes with starting a club. So that was tough. So I couldn't really do anything. So I ended up not like, pursuing it for a while. I got through sophomore year. And then out of nowhere, one day, I got an email from one of the counselors in there, and they said, "Hey, there's like these 2 other kids that are interested in, starting like club soccer here." And so I had time. I got out of class, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll drop in on this meeting. And I go in there, and there's like, a handful of kids, like, a few people that I knew from classes actually, and they're like, "Hey, like, we're trying to start this." And so that's really where club soccer kicked off at Suffolk, where we worked really hard to find a place to play, to find the right kids that wanted to play. So we ended up meeting a lot of international students, and that's where it really kicked off. Yeah, like that's really how the program started at Suffolk with like the club soccer and stuff, and it was great. Like I remember going to one of the first like pickup games with some other kids that were from UMass Boston, and it was just awesome. Like I did not expect that many people to come so quickly to play soccer. Like I thought it was so hard to find kids that wanted to play in general. So to see that was very inspiring to me because I was like, wow, like there's actually people who really enjoy the sport like I do as well and have like a very deep background. Like I've met a lot of guys through coaching at the club and through just helping in the club in general. Who have amazing stories, kids from, all over the world, whether it's France, Germany, Dubai, Saudi, like made a lot of great friends, and I'm just really happy to be a part of that. And I think before I got into coaching really through, SUFC, like I did that through like my town soccer team through Everett, where you file like the card, you watch a couple videos, things like that, really basic stuff, nothing crazy yet. I definitely want to pursue it in the future if I'm able to further coaching badges potentially, and look into things like more certifications for health, just for the safety of players, right? With things like CPR, as we mentioned. So these are things that they talk a lot about with like concussions, for example. But I got into coaching really too because I wanted to impact people that I felt, would really like enjoy learning or just being in an environment where I could help all players. And one of the things that, my coach from high school, Reese, taught me was, there's a job for everyone on this team. Everyone has a place here. You're here to grow. Just because you may not be the 11 on the field doesn't mean you have some sort of responsibility, right? And so I took that to heart, where it was like when I got into coaching, I was like, I want to make sure that every guy on this team has the ability to play, or every person, whether a guy, girl, or any team that I'm a part of, to be there to help them. Basics, fundamentals, athletics. Like I have a very good general understanding of that, and so these are the things that I've tried to share. That I have a very calm demeanor when it comes to coaching. I'm not the type of person that enforces a hyper masculine or aggressive tone. I'm only aggressive when it comes to protecting people or to set a tone if there is an issue, right? And so, but when I use the term aggressive, I don't mean hostile in any way. I mean as in terms of motivated and excited to. Right, exactly. Competitive is the term. So that's always been my demeanor. Same thing on the field. I was that guy that played in front of the defensive line, where my whole goal was to track, stopper, sweeper. So that's really where I got into the sport. And to mention, the other side of soccer that I'm still, fully in love with is really the culture, the history, and the style associated with it. For example, if you guys definitely check this out, it's called Copa 90. It's a YouTube channel, and they do mini documentaries. They're based in the UK, and they cover like all the stories about clubs, like what their jerseys means, why people follow them. It's awesome.
They cover those like rivalries, right? They have all the big rivalries. Yeah, I've watched them before. I love those.
It's great. Copa 90 is great. Skilled Twins are great. There's a couple other channels. One of my favorite shows that I grew up watching too was called Football's Greatest. You can find it on YouTube now. It was on the BBC a long time ago, and they talked about historical players. So Johan Cruyff, Diego Maradona, Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, like coaches too, right? Sir Alex Ferguson, Harry Redknapp, couple other, and like just the history of those guys and what they did in the sport. And like my favorite thing with Copa 90 and just the aesthetic in soccer in general is like it's not just about like loving the team. Like there's like political ties and deep rooted things when it comes towards the people supporting clubs, right? And so for example, like there's a great book you guys should check out too. It's just straight called El Clasico, right? And it's about Real Madrid and Barcelona. And basically it talks about the history between how each of the clubs started and why is there such an intense rivalry. And so Real Madrid was backed by the dictatorship. I forget the name of the guy, but
Franco,
basically Franco, yes, yeah, exactly. And he was, that carried on to the team style of play, where extremely aggressive, strong, like counterattack, like we're gonna hit you with everything we got. And that's been Real Madrid style forever, right? To blitz, to come fast, get that ball going, right? And on the opposite side of that was Barcelona. And so Barcelona's in Catalonia, right? And politically speaking, there are still issues there in Spain with Catalonia being its own independence, province, state, if you will, or fighting for that. And so there's a lot of political issues there between those two teams. So fans are, diehards for those types of things. And so I never knew that what the colors meant, what the teams meant. And so I love that. And so like, outside of that too, when you think about the London-based clubs, like what was Chelsea like? What was Arsenal like? What was, West Ham and all the other clubs there, Aston Villa, the Manchesters, and then other stories covered too. Like a great example is like the rivalry between the big teams in Turkey. So with Besiktas, Galatasaray, and Fenerbahce, they have insane political rivalry and things like that. But Copa 90 covered a beautiful story where there was like 3 fans from each team. They went and protested together when there were issues going on within the country many, many years ago. I know there's still a lot of political issues going on throughout Europe in general, but that story that they covered was from a while back. But it was just great to see that, like, wow, like I didn't know that there was more to these clubs than just playing soccer, watching, the game and stuff like that. So I love that. And then really quickly too, the style associated with it. Like that's one of my favorite things too with the fashion. Like, you had a lot of popular brands sponsor big teams like Italian, Serie A. Like, one of my favorite things to do is buy those types of things. Like Alex knows, for example, that I have a lot of like, jerseys and stuff like that. I don't have them down here, but I have them in my bedroom. But And like, for example, like Kappa sponsored Juve at one point, so Juventus. They have like the crazy nice jacket design. Adidas, Nike, Puma, Umbro, Diadora, and like just a lot like Mitri, things like that. And like I just love like, you know, the whole aesthetic associated with wearing those things, seeing older badges, and stuff like that. And so the whole point of just me getting into soccer was just like, you know, you meet so many different people. Like I played on the team at one point where everyone was speaking a different language, but if you didn't know us, you thought we were best friends. Like we would play forever, and like I just love that. Like anybody can join, and that's really what the premise of SUFC is too. Just in general, like, you know, speaking from my own perspective, is that it's there for everyone. And you know, whether you just started playing or whether you literally could go play D1 if you wanted to. And so that's really what I love about the sport, you know, and it made me grow as a person because you learn about discipline, you learn about scheduling, and you learn about like managing your time in general. And that's like how I got into soccer, you know, and so that will forever carry with me because with marketing, with business, you're always working with teams, you're always working with people. And so um, I covered a lot of that. And so, I mean, to tie into my story, like I've experienced a lot of different things and I'm really just pumped for the future, you know, and like one of my other things that I'm working on is my book where like I've actually kept a journal on me and I've written a lot during my different experiences over the years, whether it was dealing with a house fire, dealing with, you know, going to school and just feeling disconnected from things. And so my goal is to cover that and also to cover the experiences of my parents and what it was like to transition to this country. And so, you know, I'm still working on it. It's going to take, you know, a little more time. You know, I'm hopeful that I can push something out, you know, maybe potentially towards the end, you know, of like the semester or, you know, even just maybe another year or however long it takes to really produce like an actual published piece of work. Like I have manuscripts, I have like different drafts and things. So I'm more than happy to, you know, share that as I go along. And so, but the very premise of it is the phrase in Urdu, which is "Merapas pesi nahi." And so basically that translates to I have no money. Like, what will I do, basically, right? And so the story really is a riches to rags, rags to riches, where I have perspectives on both sides. So last term, I'll like quickly say is that you know, it sounds funny, but metaphorically speaking, it's like I've seen both sides of the dollar bill, where you know, one
Yeah.
side money was not an issue, things are great, and on the other side, it was like, you know, this $20 I have to stretch out for 2 weeks. Like, what am I supposed to do? You know, so there's a lot of things I covered like that. By all means, it's not a story of being a victim. It's about grinding through that and, you know, being where I'm at today and what the future's like. So I guess that's how you would tie this jack of all trades card, if you will.
Yeah, no, I love that way you kind of wrapped it up with that, with like your career with real estate, and then how you kind of managed like school along with your family, and then obviously your passion for soccer and how you became a coach. And I really like how you said it doesn't always matter. Like you'll take the failures. It doesn't always matter whether you win or lose. It's all about sticking up for your teammates and being part of the community. Now, speaking of losing, gas is losing value. Jake,
Yeah,
if you want to talk
gas is
about
losing
that.
value. So we're gonna kind of wrap back around the like economic topics that were brushed upon earlier. So Rick Newman works for Yahoo Life, which is part of Yahoo Finance, and he wrote an article titled "Gasoline is Becoming Worthless," and he starts it off saying, "You still will have to pay a few bucks for a gallon of gas, more in California as always." But automakers are discovering that gas-powered cars may be a liability that detracts from their valuations instead of an asset that enhances values. So, new research from Morgan Stanley argues that traditional internal combustion engines, the mainstay of automobiles for more than a century, are destined to become money losers as early as 2030. It says from a statement from the company, we believe that the market may be ascribing zero or even negative zero value for ICE, which is internal combustion engine. I'm going to mention ICE a lot during this article. Derived revenues at GM and Ford. Auto analyst Adam Jonas wrote in an article on January 29th. He lists a variety of factors that are likely to transform what were once profit-generating assets into potentially loss-making and cash-burning machines in a commitment to fully transitioning to an electrified economy. So in late January, General Motors said it plans to stop selling vehicles with tailpipe emissions by 2035. That means that GM won't sell any gas or diesel-powered vehicles, types of cars that now account for nearly all GM sales and profits. That would require an all-electric fleet powered off the electric grid, as with most current electrics, or perhaps through onboard fuel cells powered by hydrogen. While most automakers are developing electric vehicles, GM is the first one to commit to a full transition. Ford hasn't gone as far as GM, but it too plans an aggressive rollout of EVs to complement and replace current models. Most other automakers are doing the same. Dozens of EVs will flood the market in the coming years, including a Ford F-150 pickup, the Ford Mustang Mach-E. I'm pretty sure this has already hit markets in America.
Yeah,
The GMC Hummer and the Cadillac Escalade. So all of these are getting electrified in the coming years. Shares of GM and Ford have surged recently as investors seem to believe that old automakers are going to progress towards EVs in earnest. GM shares are up 51% in the last 3 months, while Ford shares are up 41%. Neither can touch Tesla, which is up 126% during the last 3 months, and a stunning 575% in the last year. But investors are now giving Detroit's Big Two more credit for electrification plans they've been skeptical about until recently. So this next part of the article talks about marketplace support. So Joe Biden's win in November in the presidential election is part of the GM and Ford equation for EV. Biden supports an aggressive transformation toward green energy with a goal of achieving net zero carbon emissions in the U.S. economy by 2050. Tailpipe emissions are a major source of carbon pollution, with sharp reductions necessary for meaningful progress on climate change domestically. President Trump questioned the science of climate change, fucking dipshit, and instituted policies meant to favor carbon energy, such as lowering fuel economy standards that his predecessor Barack Obama raised. Part of Trump's pro-carbon policy was a lawsuit meant to force California and several other states which have gas mileage standards higher than federal levels to lower them to the national standard. GM joined the Trump administration's suit against California, but since Trump lost in November, GM has since flipped their position when it was clear that the Biden administration would end the suit anyway. Since then, GM has announced a variety of electrification plans, with investors bidding the stock higher. So what you're going to see, I think, with the Biden administration coming into power is that a lot more of the traditional companies that would have tried to roll out electric as slow as possible are now trying to jump because they're going to be left behind in the new economy. And then the next part of the article goes into how how there's risk in adapting too slowly. So I was interested to see what you guys' thoughts were on this. I think it's an interesting article.
I mean, I think to start off, GM is such an old company, and they still can't even make combustible engines properly. So,
I was thinking that too.
How are they gonna make
terrible.
a shift to even more modern and more advanced engineered cars? They don't have the wherewithal to produce quality product even now, like when it's something that's going to be outdated in 10 years.
I mean, I'm with you on your outlook for GM, because particularly I don't think America's strength comes from car manufacturing. I think the Japanese have led the world for a long time. Even the Germans have higher quality standards than us. Besides Tesla.
Yeah.
Besides Tesla.
Actually,
you know what I'm saying.
I would say Ford has made a huge comeback in the last 2 to 3 years. Ford is making really good quality products.
I still think Ford standards are behind Germans and Japanese car manufacturers.
And Swedish cars too, actually.
Yes, Swedes.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's awesome to see that this is going to happen in the near future, but I seriously question if it's going to change the U.S. auto industry's position in the world. That's my take on it. And I also, I think it's interesting how they're seeing internal combustion engines becoming liabilities for car companies instead of assets in the long term. That would actually, like, a lot of that would have to do, or it would lean on the idea that Biden's going to introduce, like, subsidies for green energy, which he probably will roll out either in a stimulus or in an infrastructure bill. But a lot of that depends on what he passes in his presidential term. So, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is for sure. I think another thing to mention that might really accelerate the obsolescence of combustible engines is hydrogen powered engines. They're pretty amazing actually. They actually create less waste than EV cars. So basically, I haven't read the article on it in a long time, but essentially it needs specialized fuel, and it converts that fuel into water and feeds its battery that way. Or it's not a battery, it's like a special motor. The thing is, right now, Toyota is the only company with that technology, and to get a car that's like standard with that kind of technology costs $60,000. And the only place in the US that has a hydrogen fueling station is California. So it's really new technology, basically. But I think, as we've seen with electric cars over the next 10, 15 years, it'll start to become more modernized if Toyota develops an infrastructure for it.
Yeah, agreed. I actually think the companies that have the most to lose from electrification are Toyota and Honda, simply because they tend to sell the most units of internal combustion engines compared to most automakers. However, I do have like a lot of faith in their business models that they're going to be able to transition, not just to electric, but for Toyota, for example, to hydrogen, and then create better products than the competitors. But it is a transition. I feel like there's going to be a lot of firms that try things and fail in the coming years in the car market, and some that try things and that succeed. So, like, I feel like the car industry is one of those industries that's going to look a lot different in the next 20 years than it has in the last 20.
Yeah, for sure.
Cars specifically, compared to, like, we haven't really figured out a solution for planes or, like, large ships yet, but, like, cars are definitely going to become electrified in the next 20 years.
Maybe
Like
we'll
on a
have
large
hover
market
cars,
scale.
bro. Like the
Yeah,
Jetsons.
maybe. I just want like the once the cost for EV per kilowatt hour comes down enough and it's like less than gasoline, then I feel like at that point, and like the max range is higher than gasoline or internal combustion engines, then I feel like that's when electric cars are
Yeah,
just going to win out
that's the
broad market
thing.
support.
Gas cars are actually still a lot more convenient than electric cars,
They
but
are.
Tesla is changing that very fast, like super
Yeah.
quickly. It's insane the stuff they're able to do. But yeah, I mean, for now, combustible engines are cheapest and still the most convenient, so they're gonna be around for a while.
But the other like point to mention is that like the Trump administration gave subsidies to carbon
Yeah,
emitters. So like the reason that internal combustion engines are still more competitive right now is because they've had such a history of being subsidized by the US government in a way that like green energy products and electric cars and hydrogen cars haven't had in the past.
yeah,
So I feel like that's the one like point that's going to change the equation for electric cars.
probably.
So I definitely see that change coming. It could come sooner, but I'd say like 10 to 15 years, you'll see like a huge change in the percentage of cars on the road.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
That's
I
it.
definitely think so.
All right,
I think so.
so moving on to a different part of the world. Uh, on February 1st, what's now more commonly referred to as Myanmar, but I'm sure some people still call Burma, there was a military takeover of a democratic government on February 1st. So since then, the country has seen like some of the largest protests it's ever seen in its history, and yeah, it's pretty insane. So I'm gonna just go over a little history of Myanmar, just like quick bullet points. So they have a population of about 54 million people. The main religion is Buddhism, and they're a pretty diverse country. So they gained independence from Britain in 1948, and it was actually under military rule from 1962 until 2011. So the military has controlled this country for like pretty much all of like contemporary history. Uh, so essentially, the military changed the name to Myanmar in 1989, and uh, basically in 2011, there was a governmental shift, and they started giving more and more rights and controls back to the people. And then in 2015, Aung San Suu Kyi, who was she was the president that just got basically thrown in prison by the military during this coup. She was actually revered as like a symbol to democracy for the last like couple years. Uh, but essentially, she uh, she won the latest Democratic vote by like 80%. Her party, the NLD, they absolutely thrashed like the voting. Like they just completely like landslide victory. So basically, the military this year has said there's election fraud, and in one night they rounded up like every leader in the NLD party and threw them in jail cells. So it's pretty insane what's going on. I mean, I feel bad for the people of Myanmar. Honestly, they've struggled since about 2000, like since the early 2000s. They had massive protests in 2007 to no avail, and then like they finally get like almost a decade of democracy, and it's just taken just like that in one night. It's just insane that that can still happen.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of like also goes with what we've talked about globally, which is there's been like a large rise in populist leaders that are very extremist in their views, and like even though this is like a much smaller party, it seems like than the NDL that won the Democratic elections by a landslide. It just shows you that like strongmen and like these guys who have like military backing in like a lot of these countries can just go in and overturn essentially like progress that's been made over time, and like it's a threat. You see it all over the world. Like right now there's Russian citizens protesting Putin. I know he like jailed and he poisoned his political opposition in the latest election. You see it all over the world. Like it's there's a ton of examples that you could go with, like
Yeah.
Bolsonaro down in Brazil. Like there's a lot of scary people that are at the table right now in world politics, and it kind of makes me sad to see that we've taken such a sad turn. Like I feel like there's such a lack of humanity in a lot of populist movements that we've seen take root.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with that. You see a country that's like a relatively new democracy. Like you said, 2011. There were a military junta for like, what, 50 years before that.
Yeah.
And then you see this happen though with many new democracies. You'll see that they're just not stable for a while. They'll be either they start out like everything's going good and then you'll get corruption, or there'll be like a conflict and that will kind of turn the people against like the trust of the current leader, which will allow for like the democracy kind of to decline, because then the populace will take power again, or like the military in this case. And then you see that just like the same people, because the military, it was controlling it before, so it was only a matter of time before they get control again. So typically with these new democracies, it takes like a few trials before eventually they finally become like a stable, functioning, healthy democracy. But it is a shame, because Jake makes a good point. It seems like um, the one good thing that comes out of this is the protests, because it does seem, despite the fact that since like 2015, 2016, it did seem like there was a growing amount of kind of these like extremists taking power across Europe, Middle East, Asia, and U.S. The fact that there's these protests does show that there's a lot of people who care. They care about their country and their well-being. And you see that, like Jake said, in countries like Russia or in Belarus or in Turkey or in Armenia or um, I don't even know where else right now, but in Lebanon, for example,
Yeah.
you saw it. Anywhere where like the government has gotten very corrupt and moving towards totalitarianism or just like instability, you see these kind of protests.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good point to mention too. Like, I feel like that's a common trend in Eastern Europe and the Middle East as well, where like there's a lot of times where you see like people are trying to make the country a better place, and then they'll just get overthrown by military coups. Like,
Yeah.
uh, Eastern Europe, ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, has tried to like. There's a bunch of countries that have tried democracy, but then they just fall back into oligarchy,
Military
like
Yeah,
rule
constant.
over
well, it
time.
happened
Yeah.
all the time during the Soviet Union. Like anytime people tried to speak out, the next thing you know, martial law is instated, and then
Yeah.
the Soviets would come in with tanks and crush them. And that happened, like I said, also in several countries in the Middle East as well, when they had like just a very corrupt militaristic government, a junta. It's like the same thing happened. So it's just I'm hoping that the people, because at the end of the day, who are the ones who are the most important in a society? It's the citizens. The citizens should be the ones choosing who they govern. I think at least, and I think
Yeah.
many people agree.
Unless they
So
pour concrete in toilets.
yeah, or open all the windows and freeze the pipes out. But yeah, that's
This is
just what I
facts.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Sadiq,
also
what?
like an important. Oh, I was just gonna say
Yeah,
before we go to Sadiq is an important point is like I feel like not enough people separate people from their governments too. Is like even in like when you think about Myanmar, like I remember Chessa went like our good friend Chessa. We've had her on the show. She went to Myanmar. She said the
Yeah.
people are so nice, and like a lot of the times people equate governments and people to the same thing when in reality they're
No, they're so
two
different.
very different things. And a lot of the times I honestly think governments around the world do a disservice to their people when they're like militaristic and they oppress their populations to try and gain power.
definitely. Chessa even said how, like, one of the most upsetting things she saw is how so many of the civilians there in Myanmar lived in complete poverty. They
Yeah.
had nothing. And that's mostly the fault
Mm.
of, I mean, the democracy might have also that they had might have not been the best people. Like I said, it doesn't always work first try. But
Yeah.
surely the military junta is not getting them
No, I
anywhere.
mean
And the other
the
thing with democracy is it's still littered with corruption too. Like even in
Yeah.
the U.S., you
yeah,
see like
of
there's
course.
no really perfect form of government, but I don't really like to make that reflect on just a culture. It's really just like flaws of government.
But the military rule, historically, just based on some of the videos I've seen on BBC about it, the citizens are just fed up. Like they're so tired of it. Like they're of the mindset like anything is better than like the military having power because look at what they've done to the country. Right, none of the wealth goes into the country's citizens. And since the democratic takeover, they've seen more foreign investment within their country, which I'm sure now is going to be taken by the government right away, right? Like think about it, if you're a military general, you make the business deals, you get all the money. So that's pretty much
Yeah. What do you think, Sadiq?
I think just in general, like the way we've seen politics these last couple of years in both our domestic world and just in the world in general, it's been very divisive, and it's honestly very sad to see like how, like I guess beat up politics have has become in general, kind of like especially like the whole vernacular and the way they speak to each other, and then the way international relations are with a lot of the countries in the world. It's sad, and I think what motivates me though is looking at our generation and seeing like what we can do when we really enter this realm of like having an impact in the business world or academia or just in general whatever careers we're pursuing. I really look up to a lot of the younger politicians that we see coming up
yeah,
here in the US for standing up for basic rights. It's really sad to see that certain things are still being dealt with, like for the biggest theme of the last few years, if not forever, really has been police brutality and just sort of relations between um, people and their governments. And I feel like there needs to be like some sort of like sit down, really, if you will, to talk and sort of really understand where everyone's countries are going and like where the economies are going. It's scary to think that like we're becoming more and more infatuated with technology, and it's like, all right, like how are people doing with their comprehensive skills? Are they reading? Are they learning? Are they actively gaining things from what they're doing in their lives, or are they just sort of being engrossed by their work, from entertainment, and things like that? And so I think it's rough. Like the whole situation going on over there in Myanmar is it's very sad, and I think what we really can do is continue to do what we do best as young individuals is really share this through social media, through things like conversations like this, and have conversations. It's uncomfortable sometimes. Some people, have an issue with, discussing things like race, prejudice, or political beliefs, but you need to understand both sides. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to have an opinion. Like, let's just, learn about each other and then go from there. So I think it's just really important to like listen. Listening is a skill that we all can improve on no matter what.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
That's
a good
totally
point.
Agree with that.
I think the other point you brought up, Avi, was like the misallocation of government funds. I think like a lot of totalitarian governments, no matter like what their leanings are, right or left, a lot of the times they suppress their people by just misallocating funds and making sure that like the military has control and resources, but the civilians don't. So what you do is you essentially take away the future of a generation that's coming up in your country and can contribute to society. Instead of investing in infrastructure, education, and healthcare, stuff like that, they invested in like rocket development or like trying to build up the size of their military. And paying soldiers instead of civilians. And I think it's sad to see. You see it all over the world. It's sad. Like we've kind of backtracked in like what we try and do for foreign investment.
Yeah. That's the other thing about totalitarian governments is when you have such a strict rule over the citizens, when foreign investment is an opportunity, that's not going to go to any businesses or people of the country. It's going to go the only people that are going out and meeting people in power outside of that country are the totalitarian regime, the people in power who keep the resources for themselves. So it's understandable that it lasts so long because the amount of power people can build in just 4 to 5 years is insane. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's for sure.
Speaking of something that's insane and crazy, Super Bowl. And that score. That completely fucked me. If I predicted, if I like put money on my prediction, I would have been screwed.
Yes.
I called the Bucks winning. I said the Bucks.
Yeah, you actually got the Bucks
score
right.
Well.
You got the
honestly
like half right. But.
I owe Tom Brady like a formal apology at
Yeah,
this
you're a
point.
piece of shit for that. This kid shit on Tom Brady. Grew up in New England. Shit on Tom Brady.
Yeah, like I actually owe this man.
He was born and raised in New Hampshire,
Color,
a Patriots fan.
And I doubted this man
like
every
Tom
point
Brady was a
season.
dumpster
And he called Tom
fire.
Brady a dumpster fire.
It's like Ben Roethlisberger's better, bro.
And then I also took the
right
Chiefs,
now.
dude. I also took the Chiefs. And...
Yeah, and he said, "Well, I took the Chiefs because I was being realistic, but I should never have doubted Tom."
Yeah,
Brady.
but you didn't doubt him. Like
Right,
I honestly,
I didn't doubt him all season. I
think another thing about this, Brady was on fire, but how about that defense? The Buccaneers defense was lights out. They were playing like menace.
They didn't get credit. They didn't like.
They
the thing
shut
is,
Patrick Mahomes down. I've never seen Patrick
They
Mahomes.
made Patrick Mahomes like literally choked under them.
I've never seen him.
Did you guys see the? I forget the guy's name. He threw the deuces up after he tackled Tyreek Hill.
I saw
that.
It's crazy. Oh my god, the amount of disrespect. Tyrann Mathieu going up with what's it called? Tom Brady, Honey Badger. I was like, what are you doing? I was so shocked at that.
I think there's a bunch of records that were set. Like first time a quarterback over 40 has gone to a different conference and won a Super Bowl in their first year for a new team, and then Gronk and Brady set the touchdown record for like most between a tight end and quarterback. It might have also just been for a receiver and quarterback in playoff history. So it was like There were so many things that were done in that game that I'm just like shocked by, and Tom Brady just continues to prove me wrong. So I'm done doubting him. I just am gonna shut my mouth and say Tom Brady is the best because I can't really say anything else.
I think we should start calling Jake Max Kellerman, dude.
I think we should.
I mean, he kind of really even impressed me. Like, I don't doubt him, but I just thought like I said, having someone like Tyreek Hill as your wide receiver and someone like Travis Kelce as your tight end, and then having Andy Reid, who I would argue right now is the second. I'd say he's the second best coach in the NFL. I'd say it goes Belichick, Andy Reid, Pete Carroll, and someone like Andy Reid is your coach. Like, I just didn't think, even with Brady and Gronk and AB, and the Bucs defense, I didn't think that they could do it. But their defense, literally, not only was their defense, I swear, at least there was one. So good. There was at least a quarter of the game where the Chiefs wouldn't get past the first and second down. I swear.
It was nuts, dude. I think Mahomes
Mahomes just didn't play that well.
No, it was his offensive line. I actually think it was his offensive line.
No, it wasn't his offensive line. It was the Bucs' defensive line.
Yeah,
well, it was.
But no,
the Chiefs have a good offensive line. If you look at their stats from the season,
he was pressured 38 times. It was stupid how much Patrick Mahomes.
I think that speaks. I think the Bucs came into that game with they probably prepared a lot more, and just you could tell they just they were vicious out there.
They were. They had a balanced offense too. They established the run early, and then it opened up play action for Tom Brady. Tom Brady didn't even dominate that game. He had 3 touchdowns, so he only threw for 200 yards. But the thing is,
Leonard Fournette ran a 17 or 20-yard touchdown.
And Jones, and they both combined for a ton of yardage on the ground too. So it was just it was an absolute domination of a football game.
I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they did that to the Chiefs. I haven't seen the Chiefs be beat like that. Dude, since Mahomes started playing for them, I've never seen the Chiefs shut down like that.
That was his largest loss. That was the largest loss he's had.
I think Mahomes also, like I said, I just don't think he performed as well as he could have. Honestly, because he threw there was several incompletes he threw where I was like, bro, what's happening? But it's also crazy because this is the last Super Bowl fucking Brady played in too. Was against the Rams, and they only scored 1 field goal. And this game was only field goals, not a single touchdown from the Chiefs. Yeah. So that's got to be another record. Having 2 Super Bowls where the other team just doesn't even score a single touchdown. To give you a sense for how much Patrick Mahomes was pressured, though, I actually kind of give Patrick Mahomes a pass for this game. I know you guys probably won't be as lenient,
that's not his fault, dude. The D-line was battering.
He ran for 495 yards behind scrimmage, which means that when he was in the pocket, he ran for almost 500 yards. To give you an idea of how much he was under pressure from the Bucs defense.
That is wild.
He
ran 500 yards behind the line of scrimmage.
Yes.
That's like a Madden play from Madden 10 where you run all the way back and then just take the sideline.
I give him a pass. I think it was not his best performance, obviously, but I don't know. He'll be back. I still love Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, no. What I also thought was funny about this game, not really. Well, it's not that funny to us, but it's just kind of ironic. So, obviously, Brady is a former Pats player, but then Gronk scored twice. He's a former Pats player. And then AB, I know he played 1 game, but he's still a former Pats player. Still, though, 3 former Pats players, they all fucking scored. What is this shit?
You know who I'd hate to be more than Andy Reid or Patrick Mahomes? Bill Belichick right now.
Yeah. He's probably fucking... Actually, I feel though he has a vision though. I feel he thinks.
I don't think
in a year or 2. I think
Cam Newton is the vision.
No, fuck Cam Newton, dude.
If you actually look at the Patriots, the young defensive players have a lot of talent. And the thing is, we need receivers and a quarterback. That's really, I think Belichick structured the team well in that.
Don't worry, guys. All we need is an offense.
No, because the O-line is strong. Our running backs are really good. So there's really just receiver and quarterback.
I agree with you. There's one player. If we bring him in, I think the Pats will be a completely different team. That's Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun
Watson comes to New England.
Oh,
I'll be a lot more confident. I wanted
Bro,
Matt
that's the
Stafford,
thing.
but he got overpaid by the Rams. So,
Honestly,
like,
there's
I'm not
plenty.
really
There's
upset.
plenty of like good quarterbacks that I think Belichick can coach up. I just hope he gets someone young so they can grow into the
We have
system.
such a high like we have so much money for our salary cap right now, like free money. So I would really just like load up on
Pay
offense.
Deshaun.
I think Deshaun's
Oh,
worth, and then
Deshaun.
draft a few receivers.
Yeah.
I know so many Pats fans want Garoppolo just
No,
because
dude,
like
fuck
the nostalgia.
Garoppolo.
And
Absolutely.
because
No,
they liked
I'd,
him
I'd
back
take
then.
Garoppolo.
He was better for us than he is for
He
the
was better for
49ers.
the
Like,
Pats
he's-
than he is
Yeah.
for the 49ers.
He's not that good.
Why don't you
I'd
like
take
He's
Garoppolo.
not
Garoppolo?
that good anymore. He's injury prone.
I mean,
Like,
I
the-
think
the
it'd be
only
good
two I
back
want-
over
the
the Pats.
memories.
The only two in the league I'd take
His
are
words.
Deshaun Watson or Kirk Cousins, realistically, that we could get done.
No,
Those
Kirk
two I'd be
Cousins
fine.
kind of
with
getting
playing.
up there in age now.
Yeah.
He's not that old, though. I think
He's like
29,
30,
30.
isn't he?
Yeah. So, but that's not old for dude. Fucking Tom Brady's 43, bro.
Yeah,
You don't-
like, how-
Yeah, but you don't build a dynasty with a 30-year-old quarterback, bro. You build a dynasty with a young quarterback.
Yeah, we want a young
Dude,
quarterback.
if Tampa wins again and next year, I'm gonna like clip that.
Oh yeah,
What you
yeah.
saying?
Clip that. It's 2
You can build
years.
a dynasty with a
It's
with
2
a
years.
40-year-old
We're gonna
guy.
make you do. We're
That's
gonna,
what blows
we're gonna
my
do a
mind,
bet
dude.
next year, and
It's
if they
like,
win, you have to do
Next
something
year, I'm done talking shit, dude. Like this is the thing. I came to this like realization. I was like,
Why did you
there's
ever?
certain players. There's
stupid.
certain
You're a
players.
dumbass.
Yeah.
Why
There's
did
just
you
certain
ever?
players that have something about them. It's like Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, Bill Russell, Tom Brady. You just don't bet against them. There's something inside of them that drives them that like you just can't bet against. For me, it's like there's something that goes beyond logic, beyond like commentary. There's something that like makes superstars what they are that you just can't attribute to like predictions essentially.
Blood.
How many
It's just
people do you think
one-
said that though in the Pats Eagles Super Bowl like 4 years ago?
Yeah, I don't know, but he's got 7, dude. He's
Bro,
only
he was
lost-
probably using that as motivation for this Super Bowl. He was probably like just fuming over that.
I don't know. It's crazy though. Absolutely nuts. Sadiq, what did you think of the game? Did you watch it?
Yeah, it did. I'm actually a big NFL guy too, outside of soccer. So big fan of the Pats, obviously. But
Hey.
yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised with Tom Brady winning. I just I think he brought that mindset down there in Tampa. Like this wasn't just a random play. Like he had meetings with like Bill Gates and like all the wealthy people in Tampa to like, hey, like let's do something fun down here. And so like it was basically a game of all OGs, like guys that have been in the league for mad long. So like Nadong Makong Su is an example. Like he was on the line.
He got
for,
a sack. JPP is old
Great.
too.
Yeah,
He
dude.
blew his-
JPP
he
has
blew
never
like
lost.
3 fingers off from a firework.
Dude, Jason Pierre-Paul has never lost a playoff game. It's kind of an amazing.
He's
stat.
amazing. He's one of the best defensive ends in the league.
He's 8-0. He's 8-0 in the playoffs.
He's insane. He's a freak of nature. Bro, he blew his fingers off and he still gets sacks. Like,
Oh my god. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like the game was just like it was great to just watch the intensity of the Bucks. I feel like they were just
Yeah.
like there to like win. Like their defensive lines rushing was insane. I just loved watching them like just shout out to Mahomes. I mean, he was amazing for doing all of his runs, but like that throw where he fell and like everything like that, like he did that like 3 times in a row almost. So it was amazing to see his athleticism. I definitely think that the Chiefs will be back. Maybe not next year, but definitely the year after that. They're gonna be like it's gonna be like the Buffalo Bills and like the Chiefs being like that AFC Titan game. Really, Josh Allen, you can't sleep on him. The only issue is he only has Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs gets locked out easily because of his size. But if you can get him on speed, he's amazing. I think the Saints are going to be rebuilding. The Panthers are not doing anything, and like the NFC is really open for Tampa for at least the next 3 years,
Well, I
unless
think,
Brady decides to leave.
I think the
that's
Saints are actually pretty well built, but they're gonna have to integrate a quarterback, which is huge. I'm not
Right, and Taysom Hill is amazing, but
Yeah.
the thing is, it's like, is it him or are you going to go with Jameis Winston, the 13 interception guy? So it's like,
Jameis interception.
I don't know, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me though, like the idea of just going to a team that was 7-9 the year before, with no off season in a new conference and taking them to the Super Bowl and winning it over 40 years old. It's like so mind-blowing to me that could even happen.
Bro, imagine like the glory you must feel if you're Mike Evans right now. You're like consistently one of the top 5 receivers in the league, and your team can just not do anything for you. Brady comes in 1 year, Super Bowl, one season.
Mike Evans is actually kind of. Dude, Mike Evans is so kind too. He's like known as like the nicest superstar in the NFL. He's actually offering to take a pay cut to keep some of Tampa's core intact for next year. Like him and Brady are both gonna take pay cuts. I think. I love Mike Evans. Love Tom Brady. I shouldn't say I love Tom Brady anymore because I feel like I've lost the right to even say that. But
well, you think Ben Roethlisberger is better? So.
I did because Tom Brady's so old, but I'm wrong.
Because they went.
Dude, I've never seen someone.
They went like
40s,
11-0, playing all the worst teams in the league, dude.
Yeah, Ben Roethlisberger's washed up. Dude, if I'm being honest.
Joe Montana couldn't win on a new team. Brett Favre couldn't win on a new team. And these are guys like over 40. I don't know if Joe Montana was, but he was probably close. And then like all the great Peyton Manning, like I know he couldn't win. Like eventually he just like kind of burned.
But none
out.
of them went to 9 Super Bowls. Bro.
That's what I'm saying. It's like you can't logically divide. And like his
10 now,
his arm strength hasn't deteriorated, dude. He throws the same like he did in New England.
I feel like he's throwing.
Doesn't look older.
He threw better this year than he did the last 2 years with the
Pats.
But he had the thing is he had no options. He had no one to throw to his last year in New England. Edelman is the shell of what he used to be, and like the jury's still out on N'Keal Harry. So it's like who is Brady realistically going to have as weapons? Like I think that's why he left for Tampa.
If the Pats never lost Malcolm Mitchell, dude, Malcolm Mitchell would have been a beast.
No.
Malcolm Mitchell would have been amazing.
If Antonio Brown had never been suspended, I feel like Brady might have stayed. I think that's the one thing actually would have probably made him stay.
That might have been it. All right. Well, for everyone who's our viewers who didn't watch, it was a great game. It was literally 31-9. So, like I said, that's like a complete blowout. And Brady's still the GOAT. He still won 7 Super Bowls, appeared in 10. I don't know how you can beat that. So
that's insane.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's gonna be able to touch that for like decades.
He has as many Super Bowls as the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise has won.
More, dude. He has more than Pittsburgh and New England.
Now he has,
now he has more.
If Tom Brady was a franchise, he'd have the most Super Bowls. This one's short too, so it'll be good. All right.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna do a Reddit segment like we always do, and this is the one we decided on. All right, so in our advice, my boyfriend came to my hometown in secret and was living/sleeping with my mom. This happened a few days ago. I was on exam season of my university and couldn't have much distractions because I had to study a lot. My boyfriend decided to come to my hometown. We are in a long-distance relationship without telling me and talked only to my mother to stay the days with her at her place. This is kind of written weirdly. Me and my mother were not connected in this time because she had a huge fight with my dad and decided to move out. He knew my mom and my dad had a big argument and things were not good, and he still came. He stayed at her place, eating, sleeping, and not going to work with her, and then the worst happened when he had his own room to sleep and decided in the middle of the night to move to my mom's room and asked her if he could sleep with her near her on the bed. He even felt comfortable enough to ask my mom if he could sleep in his underwear because it was too hot in there. I'm completely in shock of this situation. I found out about this because my mom told me she felt bothered and uncomfortable with his presence and behavior. I confronted him and he told me he came here without telling me because he didn't want to bother me. He thinks that this is normal and he doesn't think anything is bad about this. Am I exaggerating things or was this completely abusive and disrespectful?
Your boyfriend's trying to fuck your mother.
Yeah, this is straight out of like a porn film.
He's like, I'm just sleeping with her just like because I'm hot, and I don't know, like in the covers.
This is
I
weird,
was like,
bro.
is this
It's
the
not
new
right.
script for the latest Pornhub like
I
top
was
video?
thinking
Like,
that. It was like girlfriend, mom. Like, cat
Honestly, I don't think it's really. I think it's hard to come back from that. I think you guys.
I think it is too.
That's pretty fucked. Like that's just an invasion of privacy, and it's just
Oh, yeah.
not morally the right thing to do. I think.
also, who has a mother lets their daughter's boyfriend sleep in the same? That's kind of.
That is also a little sus on her part when you think about it. Because why isn't she's like, I'm uncomfortable? Why is she like, get the fuck out of my
Yeah, why
bed?
isn't she like, you have a fucking room? Like,
What's even more sus is like the boyfriend knew that the mom and dad had a falling out, so he went to go stay
then
with the
he,
mom.
yeah.
Yeah, it
It's
just
like
doesn't
this
seem
guy
right.
is clearly sus.
This is super fishy. I'd say she has to. I don't know if you can come back from that one. If I was her, I'd probably break up with him.
Oh,
I
I'd
yeah.
at least try. I'd find out the answers first, and if it's what I'm thinking, I'd break up with him.
I think your boyfriend is trying to sleep with your mom, and you should just dump it.
You need answers. What do you guys think?
That's a restraining order, man. It's done. Like that's just some sus shit. I've never heard of something like that. Maybe like once randomly, but that's crazy.
Yeah, that's fucking
There's just
wild.
no way that's just a regular thing to do.
Sadiq has met people who pour concrete in toilets, and he has not come across this situation.
Yeah,
Dude.
you
The
still
only
can't
thing-
get anyone who's stooped to that level.
The only thing that could maybe salvage this is if you're into that kind of thing, maybe she can arrange something to work out
I don't
between
think she'd
the three
be.
of them.
I don't think she'd be on this Reddit page if she were into that kind of thing.
Yeah,
bro.
that's still not the right thing.
Be a,
It's not the right thing to do.
be a different
Wrong.
community website for sure.
That's not a civilized thing to do.
Hey, we all like different kinds of love, and you know,
Oh my god.
maybe she's into that kind of thing. Yeah, I ain't judging. But yeah, no, if you're like, I'm assuming if you're on this page, you should probably just dump this guy. You guys want to hear what the top comments are before we get off?
I'm willing to bet
Sure.
one of the top 5 is on a scale of 1 to 10, rate your mom.
The first one is, that boy ain't right, nor is your mom. This is just fucked all around.
This is exactly what I said.
Let me see what else. Did he actually sleep with your mom, or just ask if he could? This is very bizarre. Your mom claims to be uncomfortable, and yet you did not seem to object to his behavior. They are both at fault here. I would say wish them the best. They deserve each other. That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, I feel like yeah, just break up with them. They're a better fish in the sea for you. Obviously, you seem
Oh,
like
yeah.
a nice person that wouldn't want this. So I feel like yeah, just dump them and find someone new.
Find someone who doesn't do that kind of shit.
Find
Find
someone that
who
doesn't sleep with your mother.
Find someone who acts normally.
So we want to thank Sadiq for coming on. As
Yeah,
always,
thank you so
the
much.
viewers.
Yeah,
Thank
you've
the
been
viewers.
awesome, man.
You were a great guest.
Subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it. It was a great interview, and the topics were also fun to cover. This is Straight No Chaser, episode 22.
All right, tune in next week, guys. Remember to like and subscribe and follow us. Peace out.